The sound of the ocean carried across the deck, but no one dared to breathe too loud. The Navy's most decorated admiral stood firm, his eyes locked on a weapon that had no place in his hands. That weapon wasn't just any rifle. It was the legendary .50 cal, the kind of firepower that could shift the balance of any battle. But it didn't belong to him. It belonged to her. She wasn't an ordinary sailor, nor a soldier following orders blindly. She had earned that rifle through grit, through moments where survival hung on the edge of a trigger pull. Every scar, every sleepless night, every test of loyalty had built her into someone no one wanted to underestimate. And yet, in front of the entire crew, the Admiral made a move no one expected. He reached for the weapon as if it were his to claim. The air tightened. The crew exchanged nervous glances, sensing the storm about to break. To outsiders, it might have looked like a simple struggle over a rifle, but to those on deck, this was about respect, pride, and the truth of who really commanded the moment. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. Her hand stayed firm, her posture unshaken, her gaze sharper than steel. The Admiral's fingers brushed the cold metal, trying to pull it away. For a brief second, the deck fell silent. Then everything shifted in a heartbeat. Her reaction was swift, her control unshakable, her resolve written in every movement. The rifle was hers, and no rank, no authority, no demand could rewrite that truth. The crew stood frozen, caught between loyalty to the chain of command and awe at the sheer willpower they had just witnessed. But what happened next would etch itself into memory, a moment that turned whispers into legends. She wasn't about to let go, not now, not ever. And in the next few seconds, the Admiral would learn that some battles are lost before they even begin. But how far would she go to prove her point? And what would the cost be when the smoke cleared? The tension on deck lingered like a storm cloud refusing to break. The Admiral, known for his iron will and decades of service, had never been challenged so openly. His authority had carried him through wars, negotiations, and moments when entire fleets hung on his decisions. Yet here he was, standing toe-to-toe with someone younger, someone the Navy had once overlooked, but who had risen against every odd. She wasn't just another officer. She was a fighter forged in silence, her reputation whispered about in the mess halls long before this moment. Her story was not of privilege or easy paths. She had come from the kind of background where survival meant fighting harder than anyone else. Every assignment, every grueling drill, every test of courage had sharpened her resolve. The .50 cal in her hands was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of every sacrifice she had made to stand where she was. The Admiral might have seen it as a tool of command, but for her it was a reminder of blood, sweat, and loyalty that couldn't be taken by force. Around them, the crew pretended to stay busy, though no one could truly look away. The clatter of chains, the creak of the ship, even the cry of gulls overhead felt muted compared to the unspoken clash playing out before their eyes. Questions churned in their minds. Why would the Admiral push this far? What did he stand to gain by taking something so personal? And why did she refuse to back down when anyone else would have lowered their head? Every second stretched longer. Every glance carried weight. Neither of them moved to end it. And in that standstill, the crew knew they were witnessing the kind of moment that would echo long after the sea carried them home. The air between them felt heavy, like the weight of 1,000 unsaid words pressing down on the deck. The Admiral's jaw tightened, his pride unwilling to bend, while her steady grip on the rifle told a story of someone who had already fought too hard to let go. This wasn't just about power or chain of command. It was about everything that had brought her to this very moment. Long before she ever set foot on this ship, her path had been different from most who wore the uniform. She hadn't come from a family of officers or a legacy of medals. Her journey began far from the sea, in a world that didn't offer her much except the choice to keep moving forward or be left behind. Every challenge, every doubt cast her way had become fuel, and when she finally joined the Navy, she carried that fire with her. The .50 cal was more than steel and ammunition. It was a piece of her story, a proof of battles fought where no one else could stand. The Admiral, for all his authority, could sense that weight in her eyes. Yet he pressed on, as if taking the weapon would remind everyone on deck who truly held command. But there was more beneath his move than simple pride. Whispers had already spread among the crew that the Admiral had reasons of his own, secrets buried beneath layers of strategy and duty. Some said he feared what she represented, a new kind of strength that didn't bow to tradition. Others thought he simply couldn't allow anyone, no matter how skilled, to outshine him. The crew kept their distance, torn between loyalty to their leader and the quiet awe of watching someone who refused to bend. With every second that passed, the question grew louder. Was this just a clash of wills, or the beginning of something far larger?
The deck seemed to shrink around them, every pair of eyes locked on the standoff that no one dared to interrupt. The Admiral's hand hovered just close enough to make the crew hold their breath, while her grip on the .5 cal never wavered. The air carried a sharp silence, the kind that made even the waves against the hull sound distant. Each second dragged like an eternity, and in that stillness the unspoken challenge grew louder. She stood steady, every muscle tense but controlled, as if the years of training had prepared her for this exact moment. The Admiral's face was unreadable, carved with the kind of authority that could silence a room, yet his eyes portrayed something more, a flicker of doubt, maybe even fear. He was a man used to obedience, used to commanding fleets with a single order, but now, on this deck, his authority clashed with something stronger than rank, her unshakable resolve. The crew shifted uneasily, caught between duty and instinct. Some clenched their fists, ready to jump in if the confrontation spiraled, while others stood frozen, afraid that even a breath too loud would tip the balance. It wasn't just about a weapon anymore. It was about the truth of who had earned the right to carry it. And deep down, each sailor knew they were witnessing a battle that would define more than just the moment. It would decide the course of their loyalty. The Admiral finally tightened his stance, his voice low but edged with command, daring her to yield. But she didn't move. Instead, her eyes locked on his, sharp as the steel of the rifle itself. The tension reached its peak. A coil wound so tight it felt ready to snap at any second. The question now was not if something would break, but when. The Admiral snapped his attention toward him, irritation flashing in his eyes, but the officer didn't flinch. He handed over the folder, his voice low, carrying words that made the air grow colder. "Sir, they know. The command has seen the reports." The Admiral's grip faltered for a fraction of a second, a slip so small most might have missed it, but she didn't. Her instincts told her the conflict was no longer about a rifle. There was something bigger, something hidden beneath layers of secrecy that was finally clawing its way into the open. Her eyes narrowed, searching his face for truth. For the first time, the Admiral looked unsettled, his authority fraying under the weight of something even he couldn't fully control. And in that instant, the stakes rose higher than anyone on deck could have imagined. This was no longer just a clash of pride. It was a battle tied to secrets that could change everything. The Admiral's hand clenched around the folder, his eyes burning with the weight of secrets now too close to being exposed. She stood across from him, the .5 cal steady in her hands, her silence sharper than any words. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might still push forward, demand control, and crush any defiance. But then, in a rare crack of vulnerability, his voice slipped lower, almost like a confession. "They'll use it against me," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. The crew stiffened. No one had ever heard the Admiral sound unsure, and in that moment, the authority he carried for decades began to unravel. She didn't move closer, didn't soften. She simply watched, waiting. And then, as the sea itself chose the moment, the ship's alarm blared. A lookout from above shouted for an unknown vessel approaching fast on the horizon. The crew rushed to their stations, the deck exploding with movement. Yet all eyes kept flicking back to the two figures at the center of it all. The Admiral clutching his secrets, and the woman refusing to yield. With the threat closing in, the Admiral finally lowered his hand, letting the truth spill out without words. His silence was surrender. She tightened her grip on the .5 cal, then turned sharply toward the oncoming danger, her focus unshaken. The crew followed her lead, rallying behind the one who had proven, without a doubt, that strength was more than rank. But just as unity seemed to form, the young officer who had delivered the folder stepped back into the shadows. His eyes narrowed, a faint smile crossing his face as if he had set this all in motion. The real twist wasn't the Admiral's fall from control. It was that someone else had been pulling the strings all along. The alarms faded into the rhythm of battle stations, but the true storm had already passed on the deck. The Admiral stood motionless, shoulders heavy with the weight of choices he could no longer hide. For years he had commanded with certainty, but in one brief confrontation, that certainty had slipped through his fingers. The .5 cal was never just about firepower. It was about trust, loyalty, and the truth of who deserved to lead when everything was on the line. She held the rifle with steady hands, but she didn't raise it in triumph. Her victory wasn't about humiliation or taking power. It was about proving that real strength comes from earning respect, not demanding it. The crew, who moments earlier had been divided in silence, now found themselves united behind her. In their eyes, she was no longer just an officer. She was the one who had faced authority, exposed the cracks, and stood unshaken when it mattered most. The Admiral gave no speech, no final defense. He simply turned, his silence a quiet admission that his era of control had ended. For the young officer who had delivered the orders, his smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. The crew had seen through him too, realizing that ambition had sparked the moment as much as pride. In the end, his game unraveled before it ever began.